Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. A little bit of housekeeping before we do. Down at the bottom, you will see a Q&A button. If you have questions for Anthony, please feel free to pop them in there and we can answer them online or on the air. This webinar is brought to you by IBA. Thanks to them for sponsoring this. And a reminder that this webinar is being recorded so that we can use this later on and post it on our website and share it around through social media. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Anthony.
And you did mention our sponsor, right? IBA?
Yes, IBA.
And IBA, thank you so much. You use these, you make these things possible, and our sponsors do, and we really appreciate it. If you heard Molly Hatchet there in the intro, you know, it's funny. I went to Sumner High School out in Pierce County, and it was one of those high schools where rock T-shirts were really big. If you're a kid of the '80s, you remember the black T-shirts that had Iron Maiden and Thin Lizzy and Megadeth, right? That was the predominant music at our school, and wasn't my music per se. But I think it's the first time I was driving to work the other day, and Flirting Disaster was playing on the radio. And I'm like, I think this is the first time I've ever really related to a Molly Hatchet song of like, wow, that song's talking about me. So anyway, sorry for the little odd intro. I don't think anyone else guessed that was Molly Hatchet, but I would love to give a little bit of an update of what's happened in the past month. And really make that the focus of each of these podcasts. And then talk about some of the things we can expect coming up in the upcoming month. And after about 10, 15 minutes, I want to make this valuable to you. What are the questions you need answered? What are the things you're not seeing? What are the links you're not aware of? Again, please post every question you have in the chat room. Lisa, I can't read and respond. And the last podcast, many of you apparently have my cell phone. I knew that. And a lot of you were texting me questions to ask on my cell phone. I can't read and talk. Apparently it's a dysfunction. So please just put it in the chat room and we'll go from there. January was a crazy month and pretty insane. Someone told me the legislative staff already has more overtime in the month of January than they had the entire legislative session last year. And they still have 3 months to go. So it just tells you how much craziness is out there. Before I get into the legislative gunk, let me talk about some of the positives that happened last month. Lex, I thought your two podcasts, the other podcasts last month were fantastic. The Open Air podcast, where we had the Liquor Control Board and L&I and the Health Department on explaining. I don't think you ever get those three agencies in one room. And I thought your team and the GA team did a good job of bringing that together. So Lisa, if you can post the link to that podcast, if you haven't had a chance to watch that one, I thought it was great. And as always, Rick Bra really delivered last month. His stuff on the Triple P was fantastic. And so the Triple P is out there. People are using it. I'm saying Triple P. I really shouldn't. I should say CARES Act, because the Triple P is one part of it. And if you haven't looked at the employee tax credits or some of the other aspects of what's in that CARES Act, listen to Rick's podcast and or check in with some of the material we put online, because it's more than just Triple P. There's some good stuff in there. So that is good news. Retro checks went out. Hopefully everybody got their retro check. And if you didn't, check in with us and talk to your AC and find out what's going on. But hopefully everyone got that in the mail. You know, and some of the other stuff, Lex, that they should have seen, again, on the good news front, our new labor posters are out. They're free with your membership. If they haven't gotten their new labor poster or a poster for every location, Lex, how do they do that?
Well, they can email me at lexn@hospitality.org, and I will personally make sure that it's resolved and they get one. They can also go to the website, wahospitality.org, and we do have a link there to take them to the labor posters, and they can click that and they can request labor posters that way. We have a lot of members who need more than one, so those are available. I believe that they're $5 a poster that we do, which is a tremendous deal, which is actually below cost, and it beats paying $40 a poster that most of our members have to do prior to us providing this great resource.
You mean after is the first one free?
First one is free, yes.
All right. It's kind of like the street there. The first one's free. After that, they're $5. Kidding. And the hero manual's out too, which, but now is it all online, Lex?
Yes, the hero manual is 100% online and digital. It is available at access.wahospitality.org. That is our members only resource. If you go to that site and are not registered, there is a link there so that you could register for access. And what we do is we've parsed out the hero manual so that it's segmented by area, so you don't have to flip through 300 pages to find what you're looking for. You can easily sort through by category. So that is all up there right now. And we still have a downloadable version, so you can get a downloadable version of the hero manual at that site as well.
Okay. And for those of you who don't have it or aren't aware of what's going on with what is the hero manual? It's the handbook for excellent restaurant operations. It's akin to the lodging legal guide that's also up in that site, I believe. And we work with the state agencies every year to take every state rule, write it in very simplistic forms that even I can understand. And if you do that, you should be okay. And so it's updated annually. The lawyers review it. The state agencies review it. So when you're like, what the heck is the rule these days? Hopefully it's a one-stop shop. A lot of members say that's their number one value is the hero manual. So I always want to make sure that they know that that's updated and out there. And if you haven't got it, you can also contact your AC and go from there and get a link. So that's enough of some of those things. So let's talk about what else has occurred last month. The outdoor air rules are out there. They introduced everyone to the concept of carbon parts per million, which I have no clue what those were before. I think everyone now has a carbon monitor that they're trying to figure out, does my restaurant get here and what does that look like and how does it flow? It's not going to work for everyone. We understood that, but it'll work for many. I think in another 2 years, everyone's going to open up their junk drawer and see a carbon monitor in there and say, remember when we had to have that? But in the meantime, that option is out there for folks. There is going to be an update to that rule. We're expecting it any day now. Today, if you're listening on the rebroadcast, today is February 3rd. We're anticipating really soon an update to that rule that will hopefully make it a little more flexible, but I shouldn't assume anything in 2020 or 2021. So I'm hoping that will happen really soon. Also, let's talk a little bit about the legislature. This is a weird legislature because, why wouldn't it be weird this year? There's I'm really dividing the legislature into two parts. The first 3 weeks and then the rest of session. And the first 3 weeks is almost its own mini session because there's stuff that has to be done. And we have 3 major pieces of legislation we're trying to get done in these first 3 weeks. The good news is that one of the biggest ones, the unemployment insurance bill, got through the legislature. And again, today is Wednesday. We're anticipating the governor is going to sign that later this week. And that UI bill will remove much of the sticker shock that we got. I got an email from someone last night, and their unemployment taxes went up 10 times, tenfold. And this will bring that back down. And so once the governor signs it, we will let everyone know what's happened. But what you really need to know is sometime in March, you're going to get a new notice from ESD about what your rates are, UI rates are for 2021. I want to be clear on what it is and what it isn't. You're still going to get an increase. I'd be surprised if you didn't, but that increase is going to be dramatically lower than that first one. There's still just a lot of costs that we couldn't get all the way out of there, but it should be closer to less than double than tenfold. And everyone's going to be different. So even that statement is going to depend on the individual. So it's good news. Huge shout out to Julia Gordon. If you haven't met Julia Gordon, she's just a rock star we have on our team. She was the lead negotiator on that bill with Senate Democrats in the governor's office in coming up with a proposal that worked and trying to keep everyone balanced and focused that we needed a solution. We could not let this get drung out in a four-month negotiation. And if you've met her, you know she's fierce, and that fierceness paid off for the industry and her doing a really excellent job in getting that bill through. Doesn't fix anything, but it's a massive step in the right direction. Lex, anything else on the UI bill until it passes that, you know, if you were still had your pizza operation, you'd want me to talk about here in the moment?
No, I think you covered the major points there, Anthony.
One of the questions we have in the chat about that is there an application process that goes along with getting your fee reduced?
Well, there's the new notices will just be the new notices, and they'll be out shortly. If you're going to buy down your rates, so if you jumped more than 5 rates, there's an option to buy down your rate, and that is an application process. From that perspective, yes, you'd have to buy that back down. If you want to appeal your rate because they've misapplied some of the stuff that's been socialized or other stuff, you would have to submit an appeal application. And so that's different than what the UI bill did. And that's really going to be on a case by case. So let's say you took advantage of some of the work share stuff and you believe they've misappropriated where the charges should go, you can appeal your rate. And in this time of craziness, it's still going on there. And by the way, we're working with ESD to elevate our employees who still don't have their UI payments yet. I mean, we have people, believe it or not, back from April who are still stuck in the system. We've got a lot of people still stuck from the November layoff who can't get their UI. If any of your teammates, if any of your family members or workers are stuck in the industry, let us know. For that matter, I think leave some maybe just some email that people can respond to. But we are trying to help fix those claims as fast as we can and get people unstuck where it makes sense. So can't promise, but we are trying. Other things that are going on, there is a large crisis relief bill, I'll call it, that designates $240 million in relief. There'll be grants like that last grant was. That bill is moving through the legislature at a good pace. I'm going to stay away from the details. I do believe it's going to be out in our target of those first 3-4 weeks of session, but the details are changing. And so just know that bill is going through. We would like it to be a minimum of $20,000. We don't want $5,000 grants. They're not going to get us any of the relief we need. And we want it targeted to people who were down 25% in one of the quarters in the previous year. So we're not trying to go necessarily by industry because not everyone has the NAIC code they should, and that becomes an issue. So really the ability to demonstrate that you're down. That will mostly be, obviously lodging has been crushed, restaurants have been crushed, indoor entertainment has been crushed. It'll mostly be those, and from their quick run, it's going to mostly be our industry that gets those grants, but not all. The other bill that we're trying to get through this session is a property tax relief bill. We have to get it done in those first 3-4 weeks of session so they can get your tax rates back out before April again. So like the UI bill, if we're going to be successful on the property tax relief bill, it has to be done here in the next couple of weeks. Again, that bill is going well. There's optimism we'll be able to get that done. But it's the legislature, and bad things happen to those who assume. You have to push and assume the worst is going to happen any minute and get it all the way through. So that's legislative part one. And a lot of progress was made in that area. That doesn't even include Senate Bill 5114. If you haven't heard, Senate Bill 5114 is the bill that the legislature would take away the governor's ability to close businesses in the next, I believe it was 6 months, and would reopen the whole state at 25%. And that I'm going to turn off the chat because I'm so ADD. Gosh, I need help. When the crisis is over, I'm going to go get seen for my ADD. That bill has broad bipartisan support in the Senate. It is in committee. We have been working with the prime sponsors of that from its beginning to move something forward that can reasonably start getting our industry open at a faster rate. It actually set the record. There were over 1,500 people who signed up to testify on that bill. That blew away the hairdresser's record from a couple of years ago that was in the news. And overwhelmingly, that was our members and our industry. So I thank all of you who received the action alert, who listened to the effort and went and signed up. The testimony was too short. I don't believe the bill was given the recognition it should have been in the committee, but it had a huge impact. And the impact of that bill on the Senate, the impact of the people talking about it, really has shaken things up. And so if you remember my last podcast, I said we needed a dynamic change, that we were stuck and our game plan wasn't working. We needed something to kick the tree, to shake things up. And your work to sign up for that bill, I can't say thanks enough for everyone who did, shook things up. And so that led to the governor's first change in the metrics, which is changing from 4 of 4 to 3 of 4, and rather going week to week, going every 2 weeks. And that did open 2 areas, Puget Sound and they call it the West, but it's really Thurston County to the lower half of the coast. I'm going to talk more about that isn't enough, and that wasn't the change that was needed, even though it was a recognition that something had to change and it was a small step. But the broader point is the voices, the Senate really made a dynamic change that we needed. Going with that, we really pressed hard on PR. We were, believe it or not, quoted over 200 times in different newspapers and different interviews and different picking up of press releases in January. This ugly mug was on television over 25 times in different television interviews. We did a press conference that had over 20 members of the media in it. And so I think the press coverage is also helping move things. And many of you are part of that. If you see in a restaurant or a hotel or a bowling alley operator in the media, you may not realize it was a lot of times prompted by us. The message carries 5 times the power if it comes from someone local that they know than someone from a state level that they don't. So a lot of times I'm the voice when the message has to be tough. But if the message otherwise doesn't, it's way more powerful when it comes from you. And so I thank everyone who took a risk to go in front of the media and talk about it. Wow, Lex, that was January. I tried to keep that short, but a lot going on. Did anything I really blow and trying to go through that fast? Or
I think you covered the major points. Anthony, in the 2 decades I've lived down here in Olympia, this has been clearly the busiest legislative session that I've personally experienced just living down here. And so it's no kidding how busy everybody is right now.
Well, our legislative team and our other folks who support them, I mean, their day starts at 6:30 in the morning. I mean, my days have been starting at 6:30 in the morning with phone calls. And I'm typically leaving the office around 7:30 at night, and then doing more when I get home. And I know our GA team is too. So if you're in any kind of communication with them, these people could not possibly be working harder without just not sleeping at all. And so Julia, Sam, Katie, John, Joe, Danny, Kim, Trent. Thank you. Questions on any of the what was, and then if not, I want to talk about what's in front of us.
Yeah, we have a couple of people who have asked about the latest round of grants from the Working Washington grants. It seems that they haven't received them or haven't heard back yet. Can you talk on that?
Yes. If you know your area coordinator, email your area coordinator. If not, Lisa, can you be the catch and shooter for the emails? Can you put your email in there? Some of you are stuck, and we're helping some of you get unstuck. So last week, I personally made about 4 phone calls to get some people unstuck. They are hoping by the end of this week to get everyone through the system. And so if you are heard that you're waiting to hear and you still haven't heard, use us to be a hammer for you. I'm not promising I can deliver, but what I can promise is we will try, and we know who to call. And you're not the only ones. I believe there's several hundred that are still stuck. Okay, I'm going to move into the upcoming month of what to expect and go from there. And there's so much going on. This is really going to be GA related because it is session time, and GA is where we need the most to get done right now to get our industry open. Just a quick note on federal legislation. In the month of February and early March, we're expecting a lot of federal action. The Restaurant Act, of which we support and is a priority of the National Restaurant Association, is in the mix. And that bill is, if it gets done, and if it gets done in the way it's currently proposed, would be even better than Triple P. We might be asking for grassroots support on that as we go. But it's early in the legislative process. So to count that as an 18-pound turkey is way too early to do that. We don't know how it's going to be, or what it's going to look like, but it is moving forward. There's also a lot of local relief, and why that's important. It will relieve the efforts of the need for local taxes, but also a lot of those local grants that you got in Clark County, in Spokane County, and in Pierce County. That 3 of the counties that really did an excellent job locally with their grants. That's where that money came from. So if there's more of that money coming through, that might allow for more of those opportunities moving forward. And then you may be hearing also that it may include a minimum wage increase on the federal level over 5 years to $15, and phase out the tip credit on a national level. Whether or not that fits into this relief package or it doesn't is a legal context. But you're going to hear a lot about that in the news and in your information from AHLA and from the National Restaurant Association. And we're well aware of it. John Lane and our team is keeping daily communications with our 2 national organizations and picking and choosing when we can help. Vaccinations in the upcoming month. We need to get our ability to get vaccinations up to, roughly 50,000 a day. So I say 50K a day. I think the number is actually 47,500, but I'll be the optimist and round up to 50K. And so if you're involved in your local community and they're struggling with anything, this is a 3-part issue. The state has got to have great administration. We have to have great sites that can handle this and handle the refrigeration, handle the freezers, handle the delivery, keep people separated, and we need the supply. And a glitch in any one of those 3 things will mean we're not going to hit our goals. And if we don't hit our goals, we're in this thing for longer. So vaccinations are going to be a massive public conversation in February. And then at some point, the ball will roll with what we have. The legislative part 1 will end. And what I mean by that is those 3 bills will have gone or not gone, and we'll really get into the long haul for legislative session. And we have several priorities in what I'm calling session part 2. If you haven't heard, the Washington State Convention Center, which is funded by lodging property taxes, is in jeopardy because there's no lodging. Lodging is down incredibly heartbreaking in the Puget Sound area, in the Seattle area, which funds the convention center, which funds a lot of our tourism activity in Washington State. And so a bill to try to, or part of the budget to try to save or find a solution for the convention center will be part of our efforts. We're working hand in hand with the Washington State Destination Marketing Authority, the Seattle Visitor Convention Bureau, and the tourism industry in general. They're doing a good job of taking lead, and we're going to be a strong teammate in whatever they need to get that done. The liquor bills to both either extend or make permanent alcohol delivery and alcohol to go is going to be introduced. In fact, I think the official bill was dropped last night, but a couple of other versions of the bill were dropped earlier in the week. That will go through the normal legislative process. There was going to be some commercial eviction bills and some other things that will be out there in the second half of session, commercial property relief bills that'll be a part of the longer play. And then lastly, it's not all going to be stuff we like. We'll also be trying to make sure that during this time, nothing worse happens to the degree that we can control it. So that will be that second part of legislative session. I'm going to do one more thing, Lex, and then let's just open it up for questions. The reopen is probably going to be the biggest topic of the day and probably what most of you are dying to ask me about. The governor's announcement last week was not what we wanted. And we need three things still to be done. And we are not resting. We're not working less than 12 hours a day and until those things happen. One is we really need a stable metric. And so two of the metrics that the governor's office is currently using are really unstable. And when I say that, if this 3 out of 4 metric was in place 2 weeks ago, 3 different areas would have been open and they would have been closed this Monday. So they would have only been open for roughly 2 weeks. Though they're comparing how fast we're dropping versus where we were at 2 weeks ago. And that's an erratic measure. We're jumping 40, 50 points either direction every week. And it's not predictable. And so I am asking everyone to be cautious. I'm glad that some areas get to be open at 25%. Please don't get over your skis, because I can't promise you, and my modeling can't predict if you're still going to be open in 2 weeks. And so we're working hard on that one. And that's a key part of the conversation. We need to get everyone open at 25%. If you haven't seen the information we put out about the CDC's reported cases and deaths in December, states that were open at 50% indoor dining outperformed, were safer than states that were closed. And so there's really no reason. We're not making anything any safer by keeping everyone closed. We need to get everyone open at 25%. And then lastly, we need a path to 50, because 25% indoor dining is not sustainable. You know, the average restaurant loses $25,000 a month when closed, full service, and $18,600 when open at 25% dining. So we need to get back to 50% and keep being safe like we were back in August and September and October. The key to all of that is the Senate. And so this is where I would like to spend a little bit of time. Your senator is probably going to be the key, more than the governor, on any kind of relief and or getting open. And so if you know your senator, please keep the line of communication open. And when I say that, for those of you who are new to politics and generally don't like politics, right? You're going to build a relationship. You're going to talk about your mutual interests. That's the kind of conversation. Those are the things, the screaming, yelling, I hate you, I hate your party, I hate whatever. It's really just, you're going to get tuned out. And to the degree that you know your local senator, I promise you have some kind of local connection to him or her. Your kids maybe go to their kids' school. You might have gone to high school with them. They might be in Rotary with them. You might both support a local charity. It's the relationship, and the relationships are going to be key. And so when you're getting involved in your senator, the worst thing we can do is turn them all off and say, screw it, I wanted to help you, but you guys are a bunch of jerks. The best thing we can do is say, wow, these people really need help and I really care about them. And you do that through building a relationship. So those were just some of my stuff. January is so action-packed. I've talked more than I wanted to. Lex, anything you would, again, using your operator hat, anything?
Well, I think there's a sentiment out there of what happens if we open and we reclose. And actually, Tim Bunch from the Ram Restaurant kind of encapsulates that in his question, if I could bring that up here.
Sure.
First, what are the criteria for moving back to phase 1 after moving to phase 2, 2 or 3 metrics? And what do you think that the governor will actually do? Do you think the governor will actually go backwards? And second, does the 25% cap apply regardless of actions taken by the restaurant, such as plexiglass shields between tables, etc.?
Ask that second part in a minute. So I'm going to ask the first. So to go back to phase 1, you have to fail 2 out of the 4 metrics. And I don't think there's a single area of the state yet that's passed all 4 since they've rolled out the 4. So I think you're pretty likely to be failing 1, and the question is, you're going to fail the other. What's really interesting is when we look at the metrics, everyone thought the ICU bed was going to be the problem. And ICU beds, actually, if you look at the metric for across the state, -1 region, they're actually really stable, and they're only really over that percentage when we all knew there was truly the high point of the crisis. So the ICU bed metric's been pretty stable. The hospital and the count one is incredibly unstable. And then the positivity rate is really interesting. Generally, that's a stable and good metric, but there's a couple of communities that are way out of line with the other ones, and I don't have an answer of why. I actually spent 2-3 hours last night trying to come up with an answer of why would they be so out of line. But Eastern Washington, and I believe it is, I'm going to get it wrong, one of the other more rural areas really have a stubbornly high, for a long period of time, positivity rate. And so 2 out of 4, that's why these things we're really subject to ping pong, and we need to come up with ones that are stable. And then when you're open, unless things have gotten substantially worse, you know you're going to stay open. And right now, I cannot tell anyone that that's the case. What was the second part of Tim's question?
The second one was, does the 25% cap apply regardless of actions taken by the restaurant? So obviously some facilities it doesn't matter.
Outdoor is outdoor, and that's separate. And so outdoor over here, your indoor is your indoor. And so, again, if we push the limits will be put upon us. So just in good faith, outdoor is different and indoor is different. And then do the best you can. And if you have a good relationship with your health department, use them as a resource. If you don't, I get it. But if you do, really they're the key on how that moves forward.
Well, that actually leads us to a question that someone who Dan Zimmer asked me as well. Yeah. Is this going to when restaurants fudge on those rules? Is it going to hurt restaurants from opening that are keeping in-person dining closed and following the rules? With so many restaurants taking large liberties on the rules to open, I hope that it doesn't delay those of us who follow the rules from an opening plan.
So. The carbon per parts per million is a new metric, as a new measure that honestly, I called a whole bunch of indoor restaurant experts and design experts when this first came out and said, tell me about it. What do I need to know? I've got no background with carbon metrics. And they're like, we don't either. and they put me in touch with other people who are more in like manufacturing and have carbon issues indoor. And they're like, yeah, we don't really have any numbers for restaurants. So I can tell you the anecdotes of what we're learning from January on the carbon. and Dan, this does get to the answer to your question. I would give people grace on the carbon because it is weird. If you are back away from a street and you have a wide open parking lot, and you might have just coincidence of really good airflow, even though the openings might not be large. We've seen people be well below the 450 number. Then we've seen people who have garage doors and everything you could want for outdoor air. And those places can't get there. Not only can they not get there, their outside is higher than they are. And so their indoor air might even be cleaner than the outdoor air. And then we have other people who get there. And literally, I was just getting this was from a story from Olympia. Every time a bus goes by, their carbon jumps 70 points and it puts them over. And so like, what are we supposed to do? Reblock buses? Or, how do you manage that one? And so I would give people grace on the carbon because it is not following the common sense that the industry is used to, and we're all learning, which is why we're going back to the 3 agencies and saying, if we're cleaner than the outdoor air, can't we find some way to work this out? And we haven't got those new rules yet, but we are working on them, and we reasonably have reason to be helpful. However, if you're just opening the front door and winking and nudging and say, I'm outdoor air, yeah, I would say Dan's fear is accurate. I would say we had to push to get outdoor air, so we had more options, and they can easily go away. We are the only state in the country that got anything near this, and that can be whisked away the next time we start getting a spike or the next things start happening in a heartbeat. So I would ask you don't abuse it because you could lose it. I think that's also a 70s song. It wasn't Molly Hatchet, but so I would ask you to please respect if you're using outdoor air as the excuse and it's not just pure rebellion, please look at that. I will tell you that the people who abused the rules in July, August, and September really hurt our ability to get more when the rules changed in October for the good. And so the people who were doing karaoke, and the people who were saying screw it and letting their bar flow wide open, those cases stopped us from accomplishing more with the governor's office because they're so public and everyone puts everything on social media. Other questions, Lisa?
Yeah. Who got this question a couple of times? Who is responsible for monitoring the 2 households per table? Is it the venues or is it the customers?
So I'm going to kind of repeat something I said last month. DOH believes that about 70% of people will follow the rules if they know what they are. And they understand about 30% of people will not. And this is probably one of those rules that's they'd like to discourage large groups of people from getting together and from different households and spreading them without their masks on. So you're responsible for asking, and that asking, just like it was when a single household, could be at the front door or just having your server remind people if there's a question. But that's all you're responsible for doing. From there, it's the honor system, just like it was when it was a single household. Enforcement does fall to those 3 agencies: Liquor Control Board, Health Department, L&I. Again, L&I has almost no staff, so unless you've been really, really public and on the media, you're really unlikely to see L&I. It's just they just don't have enough staff to get to 14,000 restaurants. You're more likely to see your local health department inspector and your liquor control board inspector, and they're going to have to catch it in the moment. And so that's kind of where that one's at. I would, if it were my business, I just put a smaller reminder on the window and move on with my day.
I have a question about business interruption insurance covering losses due to the pandemic. Any updates on that?
Well, there's 2 things. We won the court case we were involved with. Lisa, if you can find the news clip from our page and put it in there, they are seeking that. I do believe there's going to be an appeal process, but our court case has gone well so far. And so our amicus brief and our support of those who are pursuing that has been helpful, and we continue to be hopeful. And I also think there's going to be legislation introduced, and I believe the bill's been dropped. And so I think we're still kind of waiting to see how serious everyone's going to take that and where that's at. And that'll be part of that second half action. Because that stuff's a little bit longer, the legislature is probably going to be more concerned on what a legislature can do regarding restricting insurances and what can hold than maybe some of the governor's actions that were meant to curb short-term stuff. So legislature conversation will be a little bit different than the governor's conversation. But that bill is out there and it's going to get a conversation. Other questions? You're on mute.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
Our reservations policy and confirmation emails include that requirement for self-attesting by guests. I believe that's about the who's in charge of the two households.
I just realized I gave a thumbs up on a podcast. Oh, that was really stupid. Hey, radio listeners, when you're listening to your car and drive home, yes, that would work. If you're doing reservations, and that's how you're getting your stuff, that's a sufficient notice. If that's all you're doing, that will work.
Given the new metrics which require ongoing reductions, what are the chances of rolling back opening?
Here's what I heard the question to be. And what I heard the question to be is, given the metrics we got until they change, what's the likelihood that more places are going to open? And here's how I would put it. Holidays have been the killer. And maybe that is a pun intended. Memorial Day, Thanksgiving, 4th of July, New Year's Eve, each one of those have had a 4 to 5 times effect on cases in the 12-day window following. The reason I'm saying that is this next few weeks, we're going to cycle out of everything that looks out of New Year's Eve, which means we're going to see a downward drop. And that will be helpful. It will be temporary, but it will be helpful. The problem is I don't really know how the hospitalization one is so erratic. I don't know how that's going to play into everything else, but from a counts and from a positivity, that's going to be helpful. However, here's my fear. Is Super Bowl going to play out like a holiday? If Super Bowl parties play out like a holiday and we see a 4 or 5 times spike again, that's going to send us the exact wrong direction. So to the degree that any of you have strong social media platforms, there's a few of you. I can't believe you got like incredible number of followers and people listen and like, hey, do you follow David's social media or Marsha's social media? Let people know that if you want your favorite bowling alley to be open, if you want your favorite card room or restaurant to be open, make good choices over Super Bowl. Because if that spikes, it's going to spike at a time where it's going to hit the dip post New Year's Eve, which means it's going to look like the increase is up again and everyone's going to close again if we don't get the metrics changed. At the end of the day, we have to change the metrics. And that's what's going to be sustainable.
All right, we have one last question and then we have to wrap it up. We are out of time. Will there be any consideration for facilities that have very high ceilings?
That will help on your carbon metric. And so let's talk about carbon for a second. You can somewhat control your parts per million in ways that I never even dreamed of. And so yes, high ceilings will help you lower your carbon parts per metric. And that's where, is high ceilings considered in the outdoor air metric or in the change? No. But do high ceilings help keep carbon parts per million down? Yes. And And God, Google ways to control carbon parts per million. There are some incredibly innovative ideas. I've seen some people buying commercial carbon filters and putting them over box fans and cleaning their own indoor air. I've seen other people, there's these little salt shaker things you can put on your table that clean it. I don't know if it's worth it for how long we might be in it, but my broader point is, if you buy a carbon thing and you're close, talk to your HVAC person or go online or talk to somebody who's made it. Don't give up, because you're probably can do some things that will bring that metric down. And again, the outdoor air that's based on the carbon, it's not going to work for everyone. So none of the agencies thought so, and we hoped it would help more, but it was the best we could do. We understand it's not going to save everyone, but you can help someone. It will help some.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Anthony, and thank you to everyone who's attended. We will post this webinar up to our webpage. It should be up this afternoon. Thank you all so much. And any
Lisa,
last words?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So any questions we didn't get to, will we be able to then just email them afterwards?
Sure. I think there's only one that I've seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if they have a question, if they're listening to this in their car on their way home, or they're listening on the follow-up on YouTube or somewhere else, and they have a question they want to ask, who should the later listeners ask? Would that be your email?
Yes. I will say it out loud here for the people who are not on the chat. My email is lisaL@wahospitality.org.
Thank you, Lisa. And everyone, we feel your pain. We're not going to stop until we get where we need. And if that means I keep gaining weight and looking like this, so be it. So we'll figure it out. And everyone, don't give up hope. And hopefully we have as much news to report on in February. Thanks for all you do in inspiring us.